Hey guys, we have a special offer for Radio Rothbard listeners. Ryan has a new book out, Breaking Away, The Case for Secession, Radical Decentralization and Smaller Polities. Again, this is the secession book you need. I know it's a topic that a lot of you guys are interested in, always a big winner when we have it on the site in our podcasts. And you can get a discount on your copy of this book using the promo code Rothpod, that is ROTHPOD. The book just came out. We debuted it at our 40th anniversary event. Ryan has a great talk on the subject. Check it out at our YouTube channel. Everywhere else you can get your Mises Institute content. And so again, that is promo code Rothpod, ROTHPOD, and you'll get a 20% off discount on your order. Welcome back to Radio Rothbard. We are here for our post-midterm wrap-up. Not quite the red wave we are expecting, but since I am coming to you live from the free state of Florida, one of the epicenters, I think, of one of the big narratives of last night, if you were out there betting on Ryan McMaken's sound grasp of Colorado politics, you could have profited from betting against the Senate candidate John O'Day. But Ryan, I think the big winner last night is anyone selling a book on the topic of secession. So congratulations on that. What are your big takeaways from the red wave that wasn't, and perhaps a big change within the GOP?
Well, in this state, the same thing happened as in 2020, where the Dem candidates did well, but on the statewide referenda and initiatives, good things happened. So it was in 2020, Polis did well, the state legislature did well, and all that. Well, I guess in 2018, when Polis was elected, so this trend goes back to 2018. He was elected, but at the same time, the voters turned down a bunch of tax increases. And then in 2020, I believe it was lowered the income tax. And then this year again, because of a state referendum, lowered the income tax again from 4.5 to 4.4. And even Denver voters blew out of the water a proposed landlord tax that was going to be used to give free attorneys to renters and stuff like that. And boy, when the Denver voters reject something like that, it must be a terrible idea. But unfortunately, all the Dem candidates did quite well, at least at the state level. And so that means the Republicans did not get a small majority in the state Senate, as I was hoping, because I just wanted someone to act as a veto on legislation going through the state. So if you just had at least one house controlled by the other party, you had a veto there. But that didn't happen. In this state, Trump has always been toxic on the Republican ticket. He did poorly both times he's run. That sort of culture war stuff has never worked in Colorado, really, and not in decades. The way to win here is to talk a lot about taxes and education and stuff like that. And that's how Bill Owens won when he had 2 terms as a Republican governor. And so there wasn't a whole lot on the ticket here. And then it looks, I don't know if you've looked recently, but Lauren Boebert, however she says it, she might lose out in western Colorado, which is generally deep red. But I guess she just had no message for the working class people in Pueblo, Colorado, which is a city in southern Colorado, which also is included in that district. I don't know. I guess maybe tweeting all day, gotcha tweets at the squad or whatever, doesn't actually get you reelected. Could be. Having no message about the economy, about inflation, apparently knowing nothing about the economy or inflation hurts you. And then in Congress, of course, you need to just promise things to your constituents, something specific. And none of that was going on. So yeah, not a whole lot of successes. I guess the 8th district here is still too close to call, which is a new district up in northern Colorado. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, elsewhere in the region, well, you got New Mexico, Michelle Lujan won again. Not a whole lot of gains there for the GOP. And then Arizona is still too close to call on a lot of this stuff as well. I guess the real story there is that Nevada actually does seem to be undergoing some sort of a shift, because that may be both Republican governor and Republican U.S. Senate after this race. So we'll see what happens there.
Nevada seems to be turning red. Arizona, again, a lot of the races there are still too close to call. I know it appears that Kerry Lake is closely making up the gap. Of course, Arizona yesterday morning, surprise, surprise, you had massive outages with voting machines. At one point, over I believe 20% of voting machines in the richest part of Arizona. I think government incompetence can only cover to a certain extent there, particularly the perception there of having the Democrat gubernatorial candidate serve at the same time as the Secretary of State at a time if all the hand-wringing about our precious democracy. The optics there are just absolutely terrible. My man Blake Masters is trailing Lake on the count there. There is, I think, at the time as we're recording this, again, Wednesday morning, there's somewhere between 20 and 30% of the vote out. What we saw is this massive change in how voting timing is a big wave. A lot of differences there. Election day voting is now where Republicans win races. And so these last ballots coming in from Arizona are election day votes. And I saw at some point, some of these drops coming in at different counties was almost a 75-25 split. So again, that's why it appears that Lake is going to capture that governor's seat. I'm hoping personally that they will follow through with Blake Masters. Again, it would be a major thing to get someone who's read Human Action in high school in the Senate. It'd be quite of a contrast. I'd love to see him debate John Fetterman in the halls of the Senate. But again, Nevada and Florida in particular. We've talked a lot about kind of the changing political shifts with Hispanic voters. I know in New York we saw significant changes with Asian voters kind of reacting to the crime issue. It's interesting, though. I know some of those Texas Hispanic districts have appear to be flipping back blue, and then that's kind of, I think, the larger narrative of last night is that going into these midterms, exit poll after exit poll, various issue-driven polling for several months now, particularly the last 6 weeks, it identified that the number one issues were inflation, the economy, crime, the border. Some states, and particularly in Arizona, abortion was a higher ranked item, mainly because Arizona was a state where election laws changed very dramatically after Dobbs with pre-existing laws in the books. But for the most part, the issues that one would think would benefit Democrats were very low priority, and yet when it comes to election results, this is, again, relative to historical trends for midterms. This is nothing short of nationally a disaster for Republicans. They are going to take the House. The Senate is still in contest, still contested. Looks like we're going to get a sequel to Georgia runoffs there. But at some point, though, we have to. It's one of the real troubling takeaways, regardless of your opinion on the Republican Party. It is the degree to which the issues that we think really matter in terms of quality of life, again, crime, order, again, inflationary economic issues. It really does appear that some of those Democratic lines on limitless abortion and the democracy being on the ballot really sways a large percentage of the electorate casting ballots now. I think we can look to a certain extent at the changes to elections post 2020, where we've seen a massive increase in states for mass mail-in balloting. We've seen a major increase in election turnout of younger voters in midterms. They've kind of seemed to be finally activated as a loyal voting base for Democrats, even outside of presidential elections. This is currently the most progressive, left-wing, whatever you want to label it, young voter base in American history. I mean, I believe it's a 4-1 margin right now. And I fear that, if you have a large percentage of the population that cares more about the right to an abortion at 8 months than you do the fact that they're poorer now than they were 2 years ago, I think even people who, like us, who are cynical to the sacred nature of democracy have to look at the results last night. And again, this is a one-time thing. It's always easy to overreact. There's many other aspects that have played into the current political moment. But I see a lot of people who went into last night, again, not as, partisan slappies, really excited about the prospect of elevating, Kevin McCarthy and Mitch McConnell's impact on American politics. Very depressed about what this really means about the political preferences of modern day America.
Well, yeah, it's hard to emphasize just how bad the GOP performance was for a midterm election. Was it 2014 or 2010 when the GOP got 65 seats during Obama's time? I mean, just an astounding, and he was a pretty popular president. And in a midterm, getting just dozens and dozens of net seats for the GOP, for the party out of power in that case. And then you're looking at, I don't know, pick up a 10 seats or something here in this case. So, yeah, pretty sad and pathetic, really, in terms of midterm performance goes, because you also had back in 1994 a 50-something seat swing. I mean, that's just expected, and the average is something like 28, and you're not even going to get up to the average on this one. So, really quite interesting, and just the closeness of a lot of the races. I'm not sure what the message was in a lot of cases. I don't even know what the message was. I guess if you watch a lot of TV, maybe you knew, but a lot of these candidates, there just didn't seem to be any particular real focus on the economy, on any real issues. Inflation at 8%, you'd think that'd be a slam dunk, but really didn't hear it mentioned that much from candidates. Of course, I didn't watch a whole lot of the debates. I mean, what I did see of Oz's performance in the Fetterman-Oz debate was not especially impressive. He just looked okay because Fetterman looked just absolutely awful. So, yeah, I don't know what their message was supposed to be. Now, they probably would have been a lot better off had unemployment risen significantly, and if your neighbor had lost his job and people were really in fear of losing their jobs. But the Fed, the Biden administration, the people putting out the jobs data, they seem to have done pretty okay in terms of holding the line economically through Election Day. It's not surprising, shocking at all that this is when we get the news from Facebook that they'll be cutting 11,000 jobs today. And of course, the slicing and dicing of jobs will continue in Silicon Valley and in the tech sector. Bloodbath in Bitcoin. There's going to be some liquidity problems out there. There's going to be employment problems, but I don't think the voters really are realizing the state of the economy. And so I don't think that helped the GOP very much.
And I think that is a good point. To a certain extent, I know that it became a kind of, and understandably so. I'm not trying to diminish, kind of the absurdity of what the Biden administration was supposed to do, but all this kind of debate about what really constitutes a recession. It's what was the old Reagan line about recessions when your neighbor loses your job, a depression is when you lose your job. I think there is a dynamic there where it's one thing to kind of be dealing with the increase of prices rising. Particularly in a relatively tight labor market. Again, I know, go flip hamburgers right now down the road, and you're making $20. If you're doing that, it's a little bit easier to fill up your car at twice the price it was in 2019. Now that's not obviously true across the board. There's many fixed wage sort of jobs out there, but I do think that perhaps the full extent of the economic pain really hasn't set in yet. It's going to be interesting to see how those change in the next couple of years when we rack this up and do it again. In regards to the House races, if it wasn't for just the dire state of kind of the country right now, the Republican Party could perhaps try to contextualize and argue that, well, in 2020, the GOP vastly overperformed in House races than what you would otherwise expect from an election that elevated Joe Biden in the White House. And so therefore, that sort of margin of House change is, you wouldn't expect it to be perhaps quite as large as a midterm reversal. But again, this doesn't make any sense, again, in a time where, again, exit poll after exit poll, again, driving into the election night party I was hosting up here in Florida last night. I mean, you had CNN, basically bawling at reading their own election polls because the polling all showed 75% of the country doesn't like the direction. But I think you hit at a very key thing, and this is something that actually Congressman Matt Gaetz down here in the Panhandle remarked a couple of weeks ago, that the Republican strategy was kind of slumping into this red wave, right? They thought that by retreating into vague attacks on Biden, kind of leaning into, are you better off than you were 2 years ago? Which, again, honestly, I'm a bit surprised that didn't pay out more, but there really is just a complete lack of vision for what the Republican Party is supposed to be. I know that you have sort of, one of the big narratives of this is, what does this mean for Trump and his impact on the Republican Party? There is an aspect of the anti-Trump kind of old school Republicans that make a big deal out of the fact, particularly when it comes to these Senate races. Oh, well, thank God for Mitch McConnell. Trump raised $100 million and spent $15 million in campaigns, which not very good. I mean, he provided about as much support to his hand-chosen candidates as he has for January 6 protesters being locked up. But the flip side of that is that, okay, well, Mitch McConnell has raised $200 million for Republican Senate candidates. Ignored in that is the fact that the greatest, perhaps, anchor, the best argument against electing a Republican senator is the idea of empowering Mitch McConnell in American politics, when Mitch McConnell is literally, I think, the least popular Republican, maybe the least popular politician. I haven't seen the side-by-side comparisons with him and Joe Biden in a while, but he's twice as unpopular nationally as Trump, in part because McConnell is not particularly liked by Republicans either. And so I'm interested to see, given the disastrous, again, I think, again, outside of the state of Florida, I think we'll talk about DeSantis here in a minute, outside of the state of Florida, this is a terrible outcome. We might be able to, there's some opportunities for some silver linings, for some of these races still out there. But I'm curious to see, what does this mean for the organizational structure of the GOP? If is there going to be heads rolling at the national party? Is Mitch McConnell's leadership in the GOP under question? You already had Josh Hawley right before the midterms, during early election day yesterday, say he's not going to vote for Mitch McConnell. I have a feeling he will not be the last. Rick Scott has been, mounting a not so subtle campaign to try to take that. But the problem is too, and this is again kind of where this, the largest takeaway it should be, that America gets the country it deserves. The argument that's going to be used against Rick Scott is that he has said publicly that entitlement programs in this country are not sustainable, and we have to get serious about addressing them. Now, one of his ideas was making sure that all Americans pay taxes, which I don't think running on, okay, we're going to increase the tax burden of poor working class people as a way of winning a democratic election. So, we'll see how that pays out, regardless of the math behind it. But it's the point where if Trump-style rah-rah populism doesn't work, if being honest about the very necessary changes that Americans are going to need to make about our expectations from the government doesn't work, if those promoting more government have a evil, anti-human, great reset mentality. I mean, what is the alternative there? And again, that's again, and I don't know, maybe the solution there is that you can point to something, someone like DeSantis who has a very clear record of improving the quality of life of his residents. But the problem is on the flip side is that for DeSantis winning in Florida, we've seen last night numerous lockdown governors, including the ghoulish, cartoonish Cruella de Vil like villain of Gretchen Whitmer winning in Michigan, which is not California or New York. That's the other side of it, is that people like us have to recognize that there's a large percentage of the population that clearly had no real problem with being locked down, having their child's development retarded by year and a half, 2 years, and are going to further empower the people that are responsible for it. And again, that's democracy, giving it to us good and hard.
Yeah, well, and I don't know how much of that message was driven home anyway. Was these people wanted to lock you up? Well, don't let it happen again. I think many people perhaps suspected that it won't happen again, so I don't have to worry about it. And so that's just not an important issue for me. And so they didn't have to throw her out of office, Whitmer specifically. But yeah, again, no clear message there except that those other guys are bad. And that I think that's just not working well for them at all. Now, of course, there were some, you mentioned silver linings, right? There are some places that the GOP doesn't have to worry about as much anymore. Ohio is one place. Florida making actual gain. They're making gains in Nevada. So there are some places where the party seems to be shoring up, and so it can focus on other places. But boy, it just hasn't made much gains in Pennsylvania or in Michigan. I mean, what the heck is up with Kansas, where their Democrat governor's doing pretty well? So that's really quite remarkable. So I have no idea what's going on there. So yeah, they're gonna have to figure out what it is they want to do. And on the last time we did this, you mentioned the whole brewing civil war within the party, right? How's that going to go 2 years from now? I mean, Trump is out there insulting DeSantis and saying, "I've got dirt on you," the most successful GOP politician at the moment. And so is that the road they want to go down then, is to trash that guy and instead prop up the 79-year-old guy who just has not proven outside of 2016 any ability to get votes? So I don't know how much he's going to try and take that ship down with him. But Trump's got so many committed followers. I mean, anytime we even say anything not worshipful about Trump, right? Mises.org has never had Trump derangement syndrome, right? Never felt the need to virtue signal about how much we hate Trump, blah, blah. Yeah, he's just the worst. He's literally Hitler, all of that stuff. That was never a thing on Mises.org. But if you ever said even the smallest critical thing, such as, hey, maybe raising taxes on the American people through tariffs, because that's just a tax on American people, maybe that's a bad thing. And then your comment section fills with crazy Trump supporters who then accuse you of having Trump derangement syndrome because you're opposed to higher taxes. And anytime we've said anything less than worshipful about Trump in the YouTube section or in the YouTube comment section of these podcasts, always people saying, Trump is my hero, unsubscribe, right? And so what are you going to do with those people? I mean, Trump could be out there just trying to destroy DeSantis in the future of the party, and these people will just absolutely support him no matter what. And so what's that going to be? Half the GOP electorate, and that means it splits the vote. That means the GOP goes down in flames in 2024 again.
Well, and you've already seen this play out. You had Trump take a very public swipe at DeSantis last week. Ron DeSanctimonious. He then yesterday morning had this quip about how if DeSantis runs against him, He's going to say a lot of unflattering things about DeSantis, things that maybe only his wife knows, which is kind of him going right into the mud straight away. The problem is that I think that I think there's been always a misdiagnosis of Trump's power, where the narrative is that Trump's real support has always come from this kind of militant personality cult style following, and in my experience, that's just simply not true. You definitely have that very interesting component of him. The people that travel to every single Trump rally as if it's a band on tour. Who are desperate for every little Trump tweet and make the decisions thereafter. But there was a large percentage of Republicans that were Tea Party people back in the day, people that were just fed up with what the Republican Party was pre-Trump. Were looking for a practical, pragmatic guy who were attracted to the mythology of Trump as the very successful businessman, and I'm not trying to take a slight at that either. His record is not perfect, but I mean his brand was success, and I'm not going to fault people for appreciating that. But they weren't kind of blindly following him everywhere. I think it's identified, particularly well during the COVID stuff, where Trump would get booed during his own rallies when he would talk about his great relationships with the CEO of Pfizer, right? And so that creates now this very interesting dynamic where, again, the biggest winner of last night was Ron DeSantis, and you have, you're going to have a bunch of Trump loyalists, particularly within the sort of laptop class political influencer base that have benefited tremendously from the Trump era. You have a number of politicians, a number of these. I'm not trying to attack them. Some of them I like a great deal. Some of them are even friends, but they have benefited tremendously from Trump. They have a sense of gratitude. They recognize that that they are best served by a Trump-led MAGA movement. But not only does I think last night really drive home the political realities of the turnoff that Trump is for a large percentage of the population. At this point, right or wrong, media created or not. But the other side of it, though, is that, if you think about the potential of what a Ron DeSantis coalition is out there, it's this very weird dynamic where, you're going to have fans of kind of Paul Ryan style, boring Republican politics, right? That are desperate to get rid of the kind of vulgar nature of Trumpism. Some of those people have been, I think, radicalized. That you think about the sort of person who was a major Trump skeptic in 2016. We can think about a Glenn Beck. Some of those, some of these were sort of like they were like Ted Cruz supporters in 2016. They were sort of the true believer, wearing a tri-point hat types during the Tea Party, were greatly distrustful of, traditionally liberal, a vulgar billionaire. They all kind of came in the fold during the Kavanaugh hearings, and just the remarkably vicious politics of self-destruction put on display. And again, this is someone who, not a fan of Kavanaugh, right? The Democrat treatment of Kavanaugh did far more to increase my opinion of Kavanaugh than anything in Kavanaugh's legal career. But seeing on that display radicalized a large percentage of Trump skeptics into the true horrors of the modern left that has then been amplified by COVID, amplified by the culture issues. Particularly, everything from Drag Queen Story Hour to the state connection to it, the Biden administration threatening education funding if you're not promoting gender affirmative surgery, government speak for child mutilation and sterilization. So they've kind of awakened to getting rid of the old political civility of the past. And so you're going to have, again, Paul Ryan supporters, prior Paul Ryan supporters more radicalized, but then part of that mixed into it is going to be the Alex Jones crowd, right? I mean, a couple of months ago, you had Alex Jones talking about how DeSantis was better than Trump, and they pointed to specifically the issues such as the vaccine and these larger skepticisms of woke corporations, their effective use of power, concerns about Davos, the Davos crowd, the Great Reset, yada, yada. And that's one of the things that I think the reason why DeSantis is uniquely positioned within the modern Republican Party is that it's someone who can appeal to those that want that sort of pragmatic, serious policy reforms aspect that we were told Paul Ryan was, and it was never quite true, but we were told, mixed with those who are true believers in the culture war and appreciate the very strong initiatives DeSantis pushed within schools, banning, anti-white, racist sort of HR programs within corporations, and coupled with that corporate power aspect, going after, DIE and ESG sort of corporate standards. And that's sort of that's what makes, I think, him as a very interesting. And again, after last night, I think he's become the de facto leader of the Republican Party. Is that he's a unique figure that can really be, in some ways, a unifier of both establishment supporters and establishment regime skeptics, in a way that no one besides DeSantis can kind of bridge that gap, right? Anyone, there's not many people with that record. Kemp, for example, Kemp opened up Georgia before DeSantis, but he didn't go nearly as hard on vaccine mandates and things like that. Then on the other side, I mean, there's a record of, and I do think there are some very talented, Trump-style politicians out there. I think Marjorie Taylor Greene is very fascinating and someone that is very easy to dismiss in a box. I think Matt Gaetz is sincerely one of the smartest politicians within Washington, but doing it in the legislative level is not the same thing as doing that in the executive level. Should Carrie Lake become governor of Arizona, I mean, maybe that's someone, but Carrie Lake is also someone who has relished in burning bridges with the establishment in a way that DeSantis has kind of played a unifying force. And so again, going forward, is there still an ability for the Republican Party to offer a message that can bring together parts of the right that very clearly distrust, if not outright hate each other? Because again, if there's anything that we can take away from last night is that simply running against the left is not enough. You have to have a forward vision, preferably a forward vision of real success. And again, I think I've had a lot of people that were very much cheering on Trump's punching at DeSantis last week that have been slating into my DMs saying you were right. Let's make America Florida. And that is, I think, going to be the biggest narrative coming out of this going forward. And of course, I'm sure that Donald Trump is going to look at last night's results and just think to himself, oh, well, the best thing for this country is to step aside and allow my protege to take over, and I'm going to take my ego out of the equation. I'm really, really sure that's going to be Trump's reaction. So like that, the drama has only started with last night, and it'd be very curious to see how quickly that amps up.
Yeah, well, wasn't he planning? The rumor was that he was planning to make an announcement about running in 2024 next week. And
that, I mean, not to cut you off, but think about this: we're going to have a dynamic where it appears we're set for a runoff in Georgia. If Trump runs, or if Trump makes his announcement next week, and particularly in the state of Georgia, where Governor Kemp won big, well exceeding the margin, exceeding his 2018 total. Against the president of Earth, Stacey Abrams. I'm looking forward to her retiring to the Georgia Aquarium. Does anyone think that's going to benefit Herschel Walker? and again, does Trump really want to have another L pinned to him this quickly after? I'm very interested to see how that potential announcement next week really works out.
Yeah, because he's essentially on the ticket in all of these races. It's really quite remarkable because he's just such a huge brand. And there's that big sliver of the party that's just really, really into him. But as what you were saying a few minutes ago, right, is that, and I used the phrase in our last meeting, our last episode, which was, I don't think a lot of these people who wouldn't mind it if Trump won, say in 2024, they nevertheless don't take orders from Trump, right? So if Trump is out there telling people to hate Ron DeSantis or hate whoever, hate Brian Kemp, there's plenty of people who aren't listening, who also don't hate Trump. But this idea that I'm going to then dictate to the party rank and file who gets nominated, who gets elected, all of that. I don't think that's ever been the case because, yeah, as you say, there's a certain percentage of people who just do whatever Trump says. But I don't think that describes most of the party, including people who you might even see wearing Trump shirts or waving Trump flags. They're not going to just sit back and say, oh, well, I guess I'll just put all my eggs in the Trump basket and just destroy all these other people who didn't like Trump sufficiently, who didn't bend the knee. That seems like something that's not going to actually happen.
Yeah, and it's, I spent last night with my local Republican club. We are a very 98% of our club, are largely there because of Trump. And it was very interesting to see in real time, prior to, at the start of the evening, I'm sure it's probably been 50-50 on what people's preferences were. A lot of people, the argument was more almost generational than it was pragmatic, right? There's a lot of people that, think that it's important to bring sort of a newer face, something a little bit less confrontational, but they would have been okay with Trump. I mean, afterwards, they were very much that margin had changed a great deal, and it's going to be interesting seeing the other side is what do Republicans do to learn from the DeSantis wave itself? Because again, you look across the board again, DeSantis didn't simply win; he won by just about 20 percentage points. I mean, this is the largest victory in decades. He did so with massive changes, not only with the incorrect to kind of homogenize Hispanic voters. I mean, he was always very strong with Cubans. You saw a massive change with Puerto Ricans. You saw a number of different demographics within Florida. He performed. I mean, he nailed, I think, just about every single voting demographic outside of single college-educated white women. And not only that, top to bottom, DeSantis also secured a supermajority at the state level. They picked up a state Senate seat to the east of me, the Tallahassee seat, where a Florida State star, Corey Simon, picked up that seat. There's again the biggest takeaway is there's a desperation for real leadership, and I'm interested to see what exactly does it look like for DeSantis to really lean into the role of party builder, because I mean the issue as well is that there's limitations to what a single political figure can do. I mean, you can have a great political figure if he is surrounded. Again, this is a little bit we saw on display on Trump. If you're surrounded by incompetent people, but more importantly, if the party apparatus around you is full of mediocrities, you're not gonna it's very difficult, particularly again given the cultural dynamic of America right now that I think was on display, and that kind of gets the other aspect to it. And this is something that it is so easy for people out there to get fixated on the horse race of party political politics and the election side of it. There is a very serious cultural and spiritual crisis in America right now, and again, particularly generationally. I think that this is mirrored. You see this play out within Europe as well. You have a lot of young people that have no sense of meaning. They are extremely nihilistic, and if the right, however you want to define it, whatever your opinions are, just objectively, if the right cannot find a way of making a meaningful pitch to these people, and this is true with the Republican Party in the U.S., this is true with, whatever, Conservative Party or whatever Nigel Farage is doing in the UK, this is true. And it's interesting, the one area where you've seen this within the West take a pivot where they've been more successful, I think, has been some of those European countries, in Italy and some of these other areas where there's kind of been a bit of a right-wing surge within young people. And again, it's politics. Again, and this is nothing new to anyone listening to Mises Institute politics. But I think the limitations of politics and serving these problems was really on full display last night. And again, the topics of balkanization, relocation to political strongholds. Again, if you are out there living in a blue-controlled state, unless you have some very strong constitutional restrictions on taxing authorities like you have over there in Colorado. But if you are living in a blue area with nothing but blue state legislators and congressional legislators, it might very well reach out to me about real estate here in the Florida Panhandle. The market has slowed down from what it was a year ago, but I'm interested to see if it heats back up after yesterday.
Well, so I guess we would wrap up kind of asking then what is going to change in terms of actual policy. And I think what's remarkable is how little things have really changed in terms of what laws will be passed, what policies will go through. Now, assuming the GOP hangs on to their slight House majority that it looks like they're going to get, they'll be able to kill some of the worst stuff. But the way the U.S. now is that the president has so much power in terms of executive orders and just ordering this, ordering that, mask mandates without sending anything through Congress for the most part. You're not going to see any big changes there. And with a razor-thin margin, at least until the economy looks awful, Biden will still be able to, I think, browbeat even some Republicans into passing some bad legislation. And so I don't even think you're seeing big changes there. Maybe the GOP can pull out a one-seat majority in the Senate, depending on how all 4 currently pending seats go. But even then, what major changes would you see? And so I don't anticipate much change at all until 2024.
No, I think you're definitely, hopefully the big takeaway from yesterday is gridlock now with the House kind of providing that check regardless of what happens within the Senate. Of course, the last thing we'd ever want is actual bipartisan policy. That's the worst sort of policy out there. I think it's going to be interesting to see the scope of investigations that the House is promising to do. We'll see if they follow through on that. But in theory, I think there could be an increased oversight and political trial aspect, which is desperately needed. Hopefully, if again, assuming there's a runoff as projected within Georgia, Rand Paul should spend the next month doing town halls up and down the state of Georgia, discussing how he plans to grill Fauci if made chair of the Senate Health Committee. That's the one aspect in particular that having a Rand Paul within that specific position, I do think would be great. So the other side of it, though, is that what does this mean for the Democrat Party going forward? The crows were kind of circling the walking corpse of Joe Biden leading into last night, but it's difficult. I think it's going to be difficult for them to sell the idea of anybody but Biden. I mean, assuming he is alive in 2024 at this point, particularly given all the other alternatives in the party. I mean, Ron DeSantis won Florida by a larger margin than Gavin Newsom won California. And so that's another thing, too, is that this perhaps actually further strengthened the decrepit hand of Joe Biden on the Democrat Party, and the long-lasting impacts of that would be very interesting.
Yes, completely agree. This election was great for Joe Biden. And one take I even read was that, hey, are the Dems secretly hoping that the GOP has a big red wave so that then gives them ammunition to get rid of Joe Biden? But that's clearly not going to happen now. Biden and his group are they can say, hey, look, we did better than history suggests we should have done by a big margin. And so I don't see what pressure they can bring to apply on Biden now. If heads roll, it's going to be in the GOP. I don't see any heads rolling in the Dem party at all.
No, I mean, I think that you might see Pelosi step down now, since she won't be Speaker of the House. She's going to use the cover of the Paul Pelosi thing to give her a nice emotional send off, maybe. But or maybe she used that as a source of fiery passion to continue on the work they're going forward. I mean, particularly again, given she can make a fairly it'd be one thing if it was a complete wipeout. It would have been easier to justify an internal leadership push against her in a way that might have made her uncomfortable. Again, I don't think that argument has gone down last night. Given the lackluster House turnover there, but she's already up there in age. We'll see how that one goes. I'm most and I'd be curious to see if Mitch McConnell continues his holding there. If particularly the small margin the Republicans have. In some ways, actually makes it easier to leverage against him if there's a strong enough bloc interested in getting rid of him. Of course, the other flip side of that is that one of the biggest arguments for getting rid of Mitch McConnell was Trump, and again, that argument has certainly taken a hit last night. So that's the only other thing there.
Yeah, so I think it's just really back to just a waiting game until 2024 to see what happens there. And we won't really know what things will look like until we have these results from these Senate races. Now, of course, the Senate will look better for the GOP in 2024, but for the next 2 years, it's just going to be if you liked the last 2 years, you'll love the next 2 years because it looks like it's just going to be real similar.
American politics has become like Marvel movies. It's just uninspired, but they keep churning it out. So again, perhaps the biggest winner last night was the interest in secession. So again, if you are listening to this podcast and you do not yet have your copy of Breaking Away, The Case for Secession, Radical Decentralization, and Small Polities by our own Ryan McMaken, you can get your copy today at Mises.org/breakingaway. Use a promo code Rothbard, and you get a nice little discount at the Mises bookstore. But with that being said, again, this is our send-off for this year's political theater. For Ryan McMaken, this is Tho Bishop. We'll see you next time.